Welcome to the show that teaches you the things your parents and teachers are too afraid to. The Helios blog. Today, Sneako and Moistkr1tikal have a heated debate. What could go wrong here?
The reason she's alone is because she's difficult.
Women are not accepting the bare minimum.
Women fuck men they respect.
All the women who say things like, I'm strong, independent, I don't need no man, like, y'all impress me.
Women just gaslight each other and say what they want to hear.
Yeah, you sound fine. Video looks good.
I gotta make sure you're. I don't have headphones because it is what it is. 1 second.
No, you're good.
You know, I met somebody that that knows you when I went to do the Jinxie podcast.
Oh yeah, at Jinxie's place.
Nah, Panera Bread. At Panera Bread. Luckily, I mean, I'm not saying this to like be a dick, but he was like, "Yo, I'm a fan of you." Like, it was like he had like some cancer thing outside Panera Bread, and he's like, Moistkr1tikal didn't donate anything. Maybe he was just trying to get a sale, and then when he said that, I'm like, "Yeah, bro, clips not mags," and then I gave him $100.
Nice. That's a sweet tip.
Yeah, I hope it wasn't a scam.
So Sneako's like, what? He's like trying to discredit Moistkr1tikal through this? He's trying to attack his character indirectly?
I doubt it. I'm pretty trusting of people, especially like out at places. I just don't think people have a reason to lie.
Okay.
Okay. This is the most scuffed setup I've had in a long time. It's whatever, bro. I'll just do it like this. And now I'm in Turkey.
Yeah, it was actually a pretty serene landscape, actually. That was very cinematic.
It was the nice flowers, and I think people had this idea that I was an angry person, or maybe that's how you painted me. And then seeing me like walk around like with the nice flowers, like, oh, okay, this guy's not, he's not that red pill rage.
Hey man, I don't try and paint you as aggressive or anything, but your clips, they like, you go ballistic.
Because man,
that's most people's impression.
I'm all clips, not mags, but things do get clipped out of context. You know, it's funny because people say like this is the biggest YouTube beef is us, and I haven't been on YouTube for the whole beef.
Yeah, that's true.
For the whole
but
time.
like even outside of YouTube, you still have a massive platform. So like it's more internet beef, I suppose, that people mean to say.
Yeah, I know. Just some of that stuff bothers me. Like when Jinxie's like, "This is the biggest YouTube beef." It's like I haven't been on YouTube for the whole time. It is frustrating not being on platforms. Since then, I've lost more. Like I'm in Turkey. People are like, "What's your Instagram?" I'm like, I have to explain. Like, oh, the Zionists banned me. They called me dangerous. This stuff. I'm not allowed on these platforms. And then I have to imagine explaining to a Turkish guy what Rumble is.
Well, I mean, you just explain it's a streaming platform. I feel like that most people know what that is.
They're like, "What's your YouTube?" And they're like searching it up, or kids, and they have to download the app, and then they try to watch my video, and they got to sign in. But it's I do like the challenge, but yeah. So let's talk about what we came to talk about.
Yeah, man. So with all of what's going on here, why are you so insistent on like the age of consent being like unreasonable? Or at least that's the impression I and most people gather from the way you speak about it.
That's a valid question, and I want to first ask, like, what's your issue with my opinion on the age of consent, age of marriage?
Because I feel like age of consent should just be an accepted number, and I think the accepted one is 18. Like, regardless of where you talk about in the world, I feel like once you start talking about someone under 18, you're basically just talking like a predator. Like, I feel like 18 is a pretty well-established
I feel like
number for most sensible people. At 18, you're going to college, you're living your own life now, you're outside.
depends on the country, right? Some is 16, some is 18. But that's general. It's around there. Depends on the country.
Of your family nest. Anything under that, you're still a kid.
Okay. It's not 18 in most of the United States where we both live, right?
Yeah, but that refers to like Romeo and Juliet laws, where if you're like 19 and with a 16-year-old, it's not technically illegal, but you're not a 19-year-old, right? So why would you be arguing for like a 16,
First off, I'm not arguing to lower the age of consent. I don't believe in the age of consent. We can get there. I want to establish some terms first.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's not even just with Romeo and Juliet laws. There's a lot of states where it's 16 regardless of Romeo and Juliet. And then you go to Europe, most countries are 16. Japan, I think they just changed it. It was like 13 or 14, and now it's 16. Brazil, it's 14. I saw that from a Nelk Boys video. They were joking around about how they should, like, when in Rome, they're in Brazil, so they might as well sleep with a 14-year-old, right? Or across the world, 18. I want to see, like, why do you think 18 is the age of consent?
Because that right now is the one that makes the most sense. I guess
To you, with your American perspective based on Puritan laws, right? It's just because you think it needs to be that way, it needs to be that way? Because it feels
to
right?
piggyback off what you're saying, so if you're traveling right now, if you go to Europe, are you going to be comfortable like hooking up with a 16-year-old? Like just because it's legal there, would that make you feel comfortable?
No, I don't hook up anymore. I'm not
saying that you do, but I'm saying if you were.
So that's, what's it called? I forgot what the argument is, but he's not arguing based on statistics, he's arguing based on one individual. So it's like a similar argument to generalizing from one individual's perspective.
Single and looking for someone, would you feel comfortable with it being a 16-year-old if it's in Europe versus US?
I wouldn't do that. Like, I would not have sex before. I think sex, like, out of wedlock altogether is something that we should not encourage anymore. And having the age of consent, having that idea encourages people to have premarital sex, right? Just that term, age of consent, means you're consenting to something that we shouldn't be doing. So no, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that.
Okay, so then instead of let's take it away from like premarital sex, would you feel comfortable marrying a 16-year-old? Like, would you meet a 16-year-old with romantic intent if you're in Europe and maybe marry a 16-year-old? Nothing sexual.
I probably wouldn't personally, because I don't think that I'd be on the same mental playing field. I like to have intellectual conversations. I like to be with women that are around my same age, because then I can have conversations. I like to relate to them. I think there'd be too much of a gap. But other people, like, if they're able to get along, then I don't see why that's so much of a problem.
But why don't you see that as a problem? So for you, you're recognizing like this person's much younger than me. It is a kid. Like you are talking to.
Okay, so let's define.
That actually is not true. That's not true. That's your perception, not the perception.
Like let's in high school.
Before we even get into, let's define these terms before we even get into this conversation. What is a child?
I would use the age of consent. Under 18 would be a kid in my eyes.
So a 17-year-old who's 364 days, that's a kid?
Yep, I'm gonna use very hard set terms. If it is under 18, even if it's 17, 364, that's still a kid.
That's a kid. Okay,
I think it's important to have these hard lines in the sand where it doesn't have this kind of wiggle room.
Okay, why does that define kid?
As I said earlier, at 18, at that point, you're going out of high school, you're going to college, you're living on your own, you're no longer, a child under your parents' roof, for the most part, extenuating circumstances, of course, but at that age, you are starting to become independent. You are no longer just in your parents' household a kid. You are now going off into the world on your own.
You do admit that varies for most people, right? A lot of people don't move out of their parents' homes until they're 25, 26, 27. A lot of people don't.
There's nothing wrong with that.
A lot of people graduate high school 16. A lot of people graduate high school 20. It's a huge variable. So to set that in stone as that this is when you're a kid and this is you're an adult, that doesn't apply to most people. So why would you define a kid and an adult if it doesn't apply to most people?
Because it needs to be defined. Otherwise, you can get into this really gray area where you, like a lot of the things you say, can be misconstrued as you wanting to have sex with a 15, 16-year-old.
Who construed that?
A lot of people, because
I don't think anybody thinks
that I played in the video, you were saying like the age of maturity, the age of development, and then you use 16 and 17 in that clip. So for the age of marriage.
The definition of an adult is 18 years old.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fine establishment right there. Anything under 18 would classify as a kid. I think that's important.
Okay, but you're getting that from what? From personal experience, from the government, from the law? Because that's legally in America, that's when you become...
I mean, if we only go back to our grandparents' generation, many got married at 18, right? So that means that they were already approaching each other romantically before 18. So they were just kids? That was illegal? That wasn't that long ago. That was 40 years ago.
Become an adult, correct?
50 years ago.
Legally.
So you're following the government's definition of an adult.
I think there needs to be a definition, and that one's been around for a long time, and I think that's the one most people accept as the closest.
Not actually that long. Less than 100 years.
To like, yeah, this is when you become an adult.
It actually hasn't, right? 200 years ago in the 1800s in America, the age of marriage...
Yeah, we can't live like that. We're so much more advanced than that. Why would we...
Can't or choose not to. These are two different things. Can't. Also, just because time passes does not mean you've become more advanced. Just because you have a smartphone doesn't mean that you can't read a book written by a person in the 1800s and think they were highly intelligent, in fact more intelligent than you. Just because an era has passed does not mean intelligence didn't exist, people weren't capable. That is also a fallacy.
We play by those rules, because at that point, are you going to start arguing that we should be able to start wedding 12-year-olds? Like, is 12 too young?
That's not the point. I'm saying...
Now that's a straw man.
You're saying that the U.S. defined adult as 18. Well, I'm saying 200 years ago, the age of marriage in America was 10 and the UK was 7. Right? So if the government decides to change it, you're saying it's 18. If the government, maybe if Kamala Harris gets elected, then the new legal age of an adult is 25. And there could be reasons to say that. They graduated college, they don't leave the house until this age. Their brains don't develop until they're 25. Your frontal cortex is not fully developed until you're 25 years old. A lot of people aren't making serious money. They're not able to live independently. A lot of things that you could use to classify an adult don't happen for the new age American until 25 years old. So if Kamala Harris raised it to 25, would you then say that that's the new age? Would you agree with that?
I think that'd be totally understandable. Like,
right.
I think
So
that's fine.
So then
like,
does that make anybody who sleeps with an under 25-year-old, does that now make them a pedophile?
No, I don't think necessarily that makes them a retroactive pedophile.
So then what's a pedophile?
But it's an accepted definition of 18 for a long time. Is
not for that long. Not for that long, and
not for that long. As I said, even 100 years ago, it wasn't like that. In World War I and World War II.
Not through most states and not through most countries across the world.
Do you see why this is like a weird take to have though? Like what? No. I don't think you're coming at this from a place of you wanting to fuck a 15-year-old, are you? Like, to go back to that question, is 12 too young? Do you think 12 is too young?
I think 12 is too young for me. Yes.
Well, for you, do you think 12 is too young in general? I feel like that should be an easy answer.
12 is too young in general.
There are many countries actually that have their kids marry before they even meet, and that's around the age when they do it. I mean, I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying that just because the United States says that it should be done that way doesn't mean that every country follows that, right?
General, correct. Because,
okay.
Yes.
And I don't think I want to define,
but what you're saying, your definition of adult is not even the actual definition. Do you know what the definition of child is? Like, anybody watching this can Google it. You can Google it too. The definition of child is somebody who has not reached puberty yet. That's the definition.
Yeah, and then you get into like a bebophile or whatever as opposed to pedophile, and those are all...
I don't know. I have no idea what those terms are. I don't know what that is, but I'm saying that's the actual definition. When somebody reaches maturity, it's based off of biological and physical maturity.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it varies for everybody. Adulthood is not something that you can set in stone because it's different for the entire world. I moved out when I was 14. A lot of people don't move out until they're 25. I went through puberty when I was 17. A lot of people went through puberty when they were 13, 14, 15. It changes for everybody. So for you to say that this is the set in stone age and say you're a pedophile if it's under 18, and then if you're over 18, you're fine. Well, then that's a weird line that doesn't make sense. So you're going to say this person is a terrible person if they're 17 years old, 364 days, and right after that, they're good to go. Well, it changes for everybody. So we have to have something, a definition. We have to be realistic with everybody. Well, we don't. But you're saying we, but that's not even the case in the country we live in.
why argue against it? If you don't want the age of consent to be lowered, why are you making arguments that the same people who do make? Right now, what you're saying is kind of what NAMBLA used to say, if you're familiar with NAMBLA.
I have no idea what this is.
NAMBLA was the North American Man-Boy Lover Association. They were
because
group.
these people don't want, they want to have sex to take advantage, and they don't abide by the rules of marriage. They don't have any sort of morality. They just want to have. I'm arguing for this because I believe in marriage. Sex should only be within wedlock. That's why I'm talking about this.
Why, if you're arguing, we can take sex out of it. Why, when you're arguing for marriage, do you want it to drop? Like, okay. 16.
When did I say? Just because I don't believe in the age of consent does not mean that I want it to drop. Like, see, that's where like the internet can go apply that. Just because I'm saying,
well, no,
because you're saying the definition of an adult is 18. I'm saying that's an arbitrary number, and that makes no sense. We should encourage marriage when people reach maturity. That makes much more logical sense.
That's even more vague, though. Like, but also you directly.
So what he's arguing for is getting married younger. To allow for bedroom fun and family creation younger, but actually what Sneako's arguing for, what that would create is marriages between like girls at age of maturity or a little bit older and men that are more established. That's what will organically happen, right? Because a girl that age can't take care of herself, right? So she's going to organically need a guy that can. So you'll get a society of age gap dating of more than 10 years, almost certainly. Which, I mean, for the last 5,000 plus years of human history is pretty much how it went, right? Like, you'd get a guy 25 plus, he would marry that 16, 17-year-old, whatever, and off you go, right? Even societies that didn't have this thing, right, would not be married so early, except for political purposes. But even in those cases, they wouldn't be having children until later because it puts the wife at risk. So again, he's just arguing based on feelings and not facts, right? Like, oh, I feel this is wrong, so I must argue for this. So he's just a mouthpiece for his audience who are liberal based on what he's saying.
Because it's different for everybody.
When someone can legally drive, they should be able to legally marry. You did say that to me.
Right. When somebody is legally ready to drive, the same thing. I think adults should drive cars. That's why I told you that.
Yeah, but 15 and 16-year-olds can drive cars. You said when someone can legally drive...
Across the world, 15 and 16-year-olds can have sex too. I think that people should not operate... But see, you keep thinking that I'm saying this because I want the age to be lowered. That's not what I'm talking about at all.
That's what it comes across as, though. When you
maybe with the internet brain, because people in the West, they want to have sex all the time and they have a different sort of mindset, right? Here in the Middle East, I'm in the Middle East right now, they want to get married and then have sex. So people, just because I'm saying this does not mean automatically lower. No, that's not the case at all. I want to ask you then, because you're insinuating that it sounds creepy and that I sound like a pedophile. What's the definition of pedophile?
It is an adult who is attracted to children.
Yeah, it comes from the Greek word pedo means child and phile means love. So somebody who loves a child.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
An adult who is attracted to a child.
To a child, somebody who has not reached physical maturity.
Yes.
That's the definition of child. Somebody who hasn't reached physical maturity. It has nothing to do with 18. The definition of the word talks about physical maturity, not the U.S. government definition that you're basing it off of.
But there needs to be an agreed upon place. Otherwise, you get into this area. Again, you said when you can legally drive, you should be able to legally marry.
Right.
We don't have to talk about sex. Do you think it's okay to be marrying a 15 or 16-year-old? Probably not, right? Like I would imagine, probably not.
It depends. So this is where the age of consent becomes arbitrary. I don't even believe like that. Consent is a weird thing to even speak about, but it should be the father, right? If I want to marry a girl, I shouldn't even just get consent from her. I should get consent from her parents. She should want to say yes. Her parents should want to say yes. That's consent from the family, and then you get married. That's the Islamic way. That's the only way that makes sense. This American way of this girl wants to have sex now, she gave consent, and then you get all these false allegations like, oh, she was drunk, oh, she took it back, oh, she retracted consent. All this stuff, like there's not even a specific way that we can define consent. What is consent? Some people say it's yes. Some people say it's like nonverbal communication. Some people say that it doesn't count because she was under the influence or she was intimidated. Even this is an arbitrary, is a weird way to define when you're allowed to be in a relationship with somebody.
You're kind of talking around it, though. Those are all very different things. Like I said, we don't have to be talking about sex. I was talking about marriage. The question was, do you think, and you said when you are legally able to drive, you should be able.
Well, actually, used to be the case. I don't know if it's the case in 2024, but it used to be the case. You actually could marry a girl that's like younger if the parents allowed it. I don't remember when it was the case that this was the law, but I know that it was at some point. You guys can tell me in the comments. I don't. Again, I'm also not necessarily arguing for this. I'm just saying that the way this guy is arguing, the guy with the long hair, is not actually based on fact. It's just based on how he feels and how his audience feels, which is not actually a way to conduct any sort of argument. We don't conduct rational arguments based on feelings.
Able to legally marry. Do you think it is okay for an adult to legally marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
By the way, when he says the word okay, he's talking like a girl, right? Like it's not okay. Like this is like the what's it called? It's like that, you know, those 30-year-old women who, you know, they've slept around and now guys don't want to marry them because they're leftover women, right? But then they call every guy that gets with a 20-year-old, they call them likes kids guy. It's the same kind of argument, you know, or 35-year-old gets with like 25-year-old and they call him gets with kid file because he's choosing to be with a 25-year-old and not them. Like that's how this guy, that's the stance that it seems that this guy is coming from. Let me know in the comments if you agree, if it seems that way, or if I'm off base here.
Okay, well, by my logic, if the man is physically mature, if he's went through puberty and he's mentally ready at the age of 16, he's an adult. If he wants to get married to another girl who becomes a woman,
I just said an adult. Is it okay for an adult?
Right, and I established, but we haven't even established exactly what an adult. So if somebody goes through puberty and they're physically ready, they're biologically ready, they're an adult. So the two 16-year-olds can be considered adults by my logic.
We're not talking about two.
What are you talking about?
We're talking about an adult.
That is an adult.
You're arguing it. It's from the
What I'm saying is
perspective
that so then what is an adult now?
Okay. We'll use your age. Someone who is 25. Is it okay for someone who is in their 20s to marry a 15 or 16-year-old? And let me explain, when you're doing your arguments, it's coming from...
That's the old system. That's literally how it's worked for like 5,000 years or more. Last 100 years they changed it. But 4,900 years of history has gone that way.
An adult. I've never heard you say like two teenagers should be able to marry like that.
And it wasn't what's it called? It was usually, though in Romeo and Juliet it wasn't, but usually it was with family consent as well. You don't just randomly get married.
I haven't heard that with these takes. I'm talking about someone in your position in the 20s. Is it okay for you to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
But teenager, even bringing up this term that has nothing to do with child and adult. So there's two phases. You're a child, and then you physically mature.
I don't know why you can't just answer that directly.
I'm saying the difference between a child and adult is when you're physically and when you're biologically, when you're mentally ready to have kids. That's the teenager is not even. So you added another term in this. It goes child and then adult. You mature, and then you're physically ready.
Well, I didn't add it. You brought in two 16-year-olds. We were talking about an adult and a 15 or 16-year-old. I was not the one that brought this into the equation.
Right. If it's illegal, if it's illegal, because we believe in Islam, we believe that we should obey the law of the land. If that's illegal, okay. if that's not permissible, then we don't do it. We don't break the law.
But we're not. I'm talking about your personal beliefs. Do you think someone in their 20s should be able to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
To someone in their 20s should be, I mean, I personally wouldn't do it. I don't know many people who would do it. The maturity for people in the teenagers in the West is getting much worse, but there are...
We're talking globally. Let's just talk globally. Like, do you think it is okay for... I'm not talking about just you specifically anymore. Anyone. Do you think it's okay for anyone in their 20s, an adult, to marry a 15 or 16-year-old?
A 21-year-old, if there was a marriage...
As I said, with parental consent, that was literally how they used to do it. That's how the old system worked, or whatever. You know, if you wanna be actually honest about how it worked, you as a 21-year-old, you would approach the parents of the kid and be like, you know, the parents of the girl you want to marry, and you'd be like, I'm interested in her. What? Or actually, sorry, not exactly. The parents would enter negotiations with the parents of the other family. Then the two kids would meet, but under supervision. Then they would decide if they actually wanted to get married, and then they'd be married. So it's like a agreement that the two families will mix, and so on. So it's a little bit different. Under those conditions, I think it'd be fine if both families were all right with it. If both of the you know, children of each family was okay with it. Again, that's the old system. And then there were ridiculous situations, right, where it was political marriage and you'd get like a 30-year-old marrying a 12-year-old and stuff like that. But that was for the purpose of when the girl comes of age and you have kids with her, it produces an heir that is related to both of our lineages. It was for political purposes, but it wasn't the way that it worked for most families. These were the exceptions, right? Not it was the exception rather than the rule in those times. So again, this guy is just talking based on feelings, and you can't base your arguments based on feelings. It doesn't. They're not rational arguments then. Alright. Let's end the video there. Buy my books like Hunter M, Adrian R, Tom and Bobby, Dylan, Renaissance Press, Brian, Andrew, Alan, Armani, and Nicholas. Shout outs to you, most recent purchaser of both my books, Quest to Live By and Strategist Guide to Seduction. If you'd like coaching services like Nick H, just message me at theheliosblog@gmail.com. That's my email. I do offer early access content on my Patreon. Thank you so much for listening, guys, especially if you listen to the end. I really do appreciate it. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.